So hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So it is definitely getting into October, and we're getting more and more into that, well, as some people like to call it around the office here, sweater weather. Definitely notice where I've been wearing a little bit more sweaters throughout the weekend. So yeah, fall is hit. Is what it is, so we just got to deal with it. But with fall comes opportunity. So if you're a realtor in the area and you're wanting to find ways that you can spruce up the number of deals that you're doing per year, working with investors is a great way to do that. Now, why do I equate working with investors to fall? You might be asking myself. The reason is because a lot of people, if they've been thinking about getting into investing, they might have actually set a goal that they want to invest and they want to buy a property within 2017. So now is the time where people really start thinking about it, because we're in the last quarter here. We're in the final stretch. 2017 is slowly drawing to a close, especially with that change in the weather. So this is an opportunity that if you understand working with investors, you can actually generate a lot more income because you're getting a lot more sales over a smaller time period. Now, the average lifespan of a buyer is, if you're going to pick them up as a second time or maybe third or fourth, it's going to be normally a 5-year cycle, right? So they bought their property, they're going to live in it for the average of 5 years. Then if you keep in touch with them, they might actually sell it with you in 5 years and buy another home. But that's a 5-year game plan per client. Working with investors helps to shorten that period of time, because whether they're an existing client that just bought, or maybe there's someone who wants to just get into investing, you could potentially do multiple sales throughout that time period when you help them get into their first home. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And in fact, I'm going to break this up into a 3-part series. So today we're going to be focusing on part 1. What do investors look for? So we're going to dive right into that right now. So the 2 primary things that investors are looking for is 1, cash flow. Does a property actually make them money every month? And the second thing is return on investment. What is their overall return based on the money they invested into this property? So we're going to dive into the 2 of them and why they're important and how you kind of calculate them. It's going to be a very rough introduction, so I definitely recommend picking up some reading on investment real estate to really dive in and understand the numbers. So the first one, as I mentioned, was cash flow. Now, cash flow is the money left over every month after you've collected your rent, paid out your expenses, paid off any debt that month, and that's, like I said, it's that money left over. What are you actually putting in your pocket, or maybe not putting in your pocket? Because you see, cash flow moves in 2 directions. Cash flow is either coming into your pocket every month, or cash flow is moving out of your pocket. So when you're analyzing a property, taking a look at its performance, you want to always make sure that there's enough cash coming into your pocket every month and going out to generate a positive cash flow. Now, if you're looking at a property and it's maybe generating $20 or whatever, it might be a little thin on the cash flow. Yes, it does cash flow, but if anything changes in the market and those rents go down, well, potentially you're going to be in that negative cash flow. And any time you have negative cash flow, you actually have to put out money every month to keep that property going, and so that the bank doesn't call and say, hey, we're not getting our total amount for our mortgage here. So once again, when you're looking at those properties, figure out what your market rents are. It's easy enough to figure out most expenses, especially if you have the tenants cover the property utilities. And so figure out your rents, what are your taxes, what's your insurance. You can calculate a vacancy or repair rate if you have someone manage it. You'll be able to calculate how much your debt is on that property, because, well, you figure out generally what your interest rate's going to be on it, how much you're going to put down, and you can figure out exactly how much that cash flow is going to be every month. If it's big enough for you, then you can pass it along to your clients, or if it matches what they're looking for. So that's one very important piece, but it's not the most important necessarily, because tying in with cash flow is your return on investment. Now, return on investment is exactly how much money we're getting back out of this property compared to how much we put in. Now, in any investment, you want to find out what your ROI is, return on investment, ROI. So before we really dive into calculating the 4 different types of returns, I just want to discuss return on investment as a general source. Now, a return on investment, as I mentioned earlier, is how much money you're getting back after how much you put out. But how do you calculate how much money you actually have to put into a deal? Well, it's pretty simple. In most properties, you're going to have a down payment. You're going to have closing costs such as legal, maybe some inspection fees. Depending on the province you're in, you've got property transfer tax. So those are all things that you figure out. How much money do I need to actually put into this property during the purchase phase to be able to purchase it? And then it's using that closing costs to be able to figure out what your general returns are going to be in the 4 categories. First return category is cash on cash. Now, we just talked about cash flow. Now we're going to figure out how much that cash flow generates us in a return. Now, cash on cash is generated by figuring out what our annual cash flow is. So we take that monthly bit, let's say it's $100 a month, we know we have $1,200 at the end of the year, we take that $1,200 and we divide it into the number of our closing costs, how much it costs us to actually purchase this property. And that's going to give us a relatively small return. It's not our biggest source. It's definitely one that is very, very important. We want to make sure we have cash on cash return, but it's not necessarily going to be our biggest source of return. But that's how we calculate it, is taking that monthly cash flow, dividing it into our closing costs to be able to come up with our cash on cash return. The second one is our most consistent form of return, and that's our return on equity. Now, equity is figured out by how much are we getting in principal reduction on our mortgage every month. Now, every time you collect that rent, you're using that tenant's rent to pay your mortgage down. So really, your tenant's paying your mortgage for you, and that's where you generate your return on equity. To figure it out, you take what that principal reduction is every month, you multiply that by 12, and once again, divide it into your closing costs, what your down payment was, legal fees, all the stuff it took to purchase that property, and it will give you a general return on your equity. The third is your most inconsistent form, but also your greatest form of returns, and that's your appreciation. Now, the appreciation on a property is why I say it's inconsistent, is because you can't really necessarily judge what that's going to be. So some markets might be going really crazy, like right now, the Lower Mainland. If you're buying a condo, you could potentially have up to 30% appreciation on your condo. Or if you're in, say, a market like Edmonton, like I am, you might be lucky to get 1 or 2%. So general rule of thumb for most investors that they use is a 3% appreciation. So that way you're building in that the property will go up in the long run over time, but you're not going to use the 30% because you're not guaranteed that it's going to go that 30%. So using a 3% on appreciation, you know you're going to get some return. You mark that property up 3% from where you purchased it from, and that difference divided against your closing costs generate your annual appreciation return. Now, the fourth center, which is a little bit separate, if you're buying a property just as a rental, you'll typically get those first three. The fourth is more if you're actually doing improvements, and it's what we call a forced appreciation. So forced appreciation is where you're actually forcing the value up on that property by doing something to it that allows you to then generate a return on that forced growth. So a lot of times we consider that flipping properties or doing renovations and selling. So when you purchase a property, you're going to have a bit more in costs because you're going to have to factor in your closing cost to buy it, maybe some renovation costs, some selling costs, but you're going to get a gain above and beyond all of that. So you're looking to force that value up enough that when you sell it, you get a profit divided against your closing, holding, and other costs, generates a return for you. So that's what we call forced appreciation, and that's our fourth way that we actually can generate returns on investments. Now, very savvy investors actually find a way to incorporate all four of them, doing something where you buy a property that you want to hold as a rental, but it needs some work. So you get in there and renovate it first, force that value up, then maybe you can refinance, take some money out of the property, put a tenant in place, and hold on to that property. Now you're getting all four sections of that return. So those are the four general returns people are looking for. So the first things first, people want to see that the property cash flows, especially if they're going to hold it as a rental. The second piece of it is they want to make sure they're getting a positive return in the different sections they're targeting. Once again, if you're just buying a property to hold, you'll probably get one of the first three. Now, you can also check out my video on real estate as a 3-course meal. I'll just have it posted up here that explains those three in a little bit more detail. Or if you're buying properties to, say, flip, you'll get that fourth piece. So those are the two main things, return on investment and cash flow, that investors are looking for. And as a realtor who's helping investors out, you need to understand how to calculate those different returns and where to find your cash flow, because they're going to ask you, and you need to be able to understand the language of an investor. So guys, that's it for part 1 of this 3-part series. We're going to be going into part 2 next week, next Thursday at 9 a.m. If you like the content of this video, don't forget, give me a big thumbs up. I do appreciate everyone who's been liking my videos, as well as throw some comments below. What are some other things that you'd like to see me talk about in regards to working with investors, especially if you want to branch out into that? What are some other ways that I can help you out branch into that realm of investment real estate? Lastly, if you haven't already done so, click that subscribe button. It's going to appear right here for you guys. Really appreciate everyone, and as always, I'll see you next week. So these are our 2 lovely new administrative assistants. Hi, Brenda. And Karina, welcome to the team, guys. Brenda started with us about 2 weeks ago, and Karina, this is her first day. So everyone, throw a comment below welcoming them to the team.